Hidden amidst the rocky canyons of California's remote Anza-Borrego Desert is a stretch of an original wagon road, dating all the way back to 1847. It was first carved out by the Mormon Battalion as they made their way through the deserts of the Southwest en route to San Diego. It was used by the U.S. Army, traversed by pioneers in search of gold, served the Butterfield Stagecoach Line, and even traveled by Mark Twain. Today, remnants of this old wagon road remain etched into the landscape. A road so treacherous that in 1849 it was described as the most hideous road I ever saw. If you've watched my channel for a while, you know that I love searching out sites and relics of the Old West. And I've even retraced many portions of the original Butterfield Stagecoach Line here throughout Southern California to find old stagecoach stops. Well, today I am excited to return to one of the most remote stretches of the Butterfield Stage Line to walk an original circa 1847 wagon road. This really is one of the most remote areas of San Diego County, and I have not heard or seen a car drive by for quite some time. And the S2 highway parallels much of this stretch of wagon road that remains today. It may be kind of difficult to see, but we are walking on the original wagon road that was carved out in 1847 by the Mormon Battalion. This wagon road stretches through Treacherous Box Canyon, which is also known as Cook's Pass or Devil's Canyon. Other than the intense summer heat, this area is really known for its rocky landscape and difficult terrain. So when the Mormon Battalion came through this very region in 1847 as part of their march from Council Bluffs, Iowa to San Diego, California, it made for a rough time. Under the command of Army Lieutenant Colonel Philip St. George Cook, the few hundred men of the Mormon Battalion used axes to chip away the rock and hew out a passage barely wide enough for their wagons to pass through. Yet despite this rudimentary pass carved out by the Mormon Battalion, it remained a difficult section of the trail to traverse. So much so that in 1849, it was described as, quote, the most hideous road I ever saw. So this wagon road continued in use for many decades. The U.S. Army traversed it. Thousands of immigrants used it as they headed north during the California Gold Rush in 1849. And when the Butterfield Stage Line was established in 1858, the Southern Immigrant Trail, which we're walking on a portion of now, was used, which meant that stagecoaches had to travel through Box Canyon and these narrow rocky passages. And today, other than this stretch of trail itself, I've read that you can actually still see evidence of the axe swings and chipped rock made by the Mormon Battalion over 170 years ago. So I'm really interested to see if we can actually find some of that evidence of their work. We're starting to descend a little bit more into the canyon, and up there you can actually see the edge of the S2 highway. So we were parallel to it, now we're starting to get pretty far below it now. It's starting to get a little bit rockier, and I believe as we press on, we'll start to descend into more of the canyon and really gain an appreciation for this geography and what it would have taken back in the 1840s to hew out a wagon road. It's changed a bit in the past 170 years or so, but for the most part, you're seeing what they would have seen back in the day. Yeah, it's the further I descend down into the canyon, the rockier it gets. And I'm starting to see these jagged rocky bluffs on both sides of me, both sides of the trail here. I don't even know how you look at this and say, yep, let's do it. But I guess when you're left little to no choice, especially back then, you made do and you did what had to be done. Looking at some of this rock face, I really can't imagine trying to get a wagon through this. And this is after already traveling for hundreds and hundreds of miles. Pretty close to your destination for the Mormon Battalion, having left Iowa and coming all the way out to California. So getting to this appropriately named Devil's Canyon, I like that name a little bit more than Box Canyon. I can see how important it was to cut through this and get access because they really had no other way. I'm taking a pause here partway through my hike in this particularly rocky stretch, which I can imagine would have been a nightmare to carve through and traverse. But while I'm taking this break, I wanted to read a quote from 1852 to just really give you an idea of how rough this stretch of this wagon road was. A man named John R. Bartlett came through this canyon with the U.S. Boundary Commission in 1852, and this is how he described their passage. This defile consists of perpendicular walls of rock about 15 feet high, and of a width barely sufficient for wagons to pass. In its bed are large masses of rock reaching to the axle trees. At the narrowest point, one of the wagons stuck fast, but after taking out the mules, by dint of lifting and prying, we at length got through. The space here was but 2 inches wider than the axle trees of the wagons. There were also several steep and rocky descents where the wheels had to be locked and the wagons held back with ropes. And if that quote doesn't best describe a portion such as this, I don't know what does. These craggy rock faces are 15 feet plus for sure. And it is hard to fathom that wagons regularly traveled this section of this wagon road, to include during the years of the Butterfield Stagecoach Line from 1858 to 1861. But here we are, walking a very remote and often not traveled stretch of a wagon road that was first carved out by the Mormon Battalion in 1847. I'm continuing down the trail, and I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but up there on top of the hill, I see a stone marker, so I'm gonna take this short detour to go check that out. Well, I'm not entirely sure what I was thinking because there is no real way to get up to that marker from here, but this is a little side trail off the wagon road. I read about this. This is a bedrock funnel, sort of like a dry waterfall, and it is a really neat geological feature. Checking out the patterns and the shape of the rock there. And it makes me wonder if all the way back in 1847, if the Mormon Battalion came off trail a little bit, well, I guess the trail they were making, and came over to see this, or if any of them stumbled upon this. It's kind of a cool thing to think about 170 years later, looking at some of the same features that folks did in the past. It actually reminds me when I visited the Natural Bridge in Virginia, which is a really cool feature if you hadn't seen it, but it had been visited by George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. It's just cool to think about all these founding fathers who laid eyes on and marveled at the same natural features that we do today. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and continue back towards the wagon road. All right, you guys are gonna think I'm crazy for doing this, but it looks like there may be a narrow passage up the side of the rocks to go see that monument, because I'm not sure how to get to it even from the road, which I'm sure once I get up there I'll see it's pretty easy. But I'm gonna go ahead and climb up this to check out the monument before we press on down the wagon road. Okay, I made it up the rock face, and for these views alone it was completely worth it. But I did find the marker that I saw from down there in the canyon. So the geological feature we just looked at is the bedrock funnel. And this marker reads, "The southern route into California had a distinct advantage. It can be used in winter. Indians, adventurers, soldiers, sheep and cattle herders, immigrants intent on starting new lives in California, and 49ers in search of gold all trekked across the desert on the trail that passed nearby. This route also had its disadvantages. Summer travel could be dangerously hot and dry. Year-round, Box Canyon, a narrow slot through desert bedrock, posed a real challenge. Daniel Tyler, a member of the Mormon Battalion, recruited for the Mexican War by the U.S. Army, described an 1846 struggle between the battalion and bedrock. Quote, "As we traveled up the dry bed, the chasm became more contracted until we found ourselves in a passage at least a foot narrower than our wagons. With axes, crowbars, and shovels, the battalion hacked away canyon rock until their wagons could inch through." So I figured this would happen to me, but when I was looking over here, I see the original California marker that is right off the side of the S2. So I'm gonna go and check that out real quick before we head back down the old wagon road. So here is the California state marker for Box Canyon. And if you saw my very first video where I retraced portions of the Butterfield Stagecoach Line, I actually visited this marker before because this was an important portion of that stagecoach line as we've been discussing. And this sign mentions that on January 19th, 1847, the Mormon Battalion under command of Lieutenant Colonel Philip St. George Cook, using hand tools, hewed a passage through the rocky walls of the narrow gorge for their wagons and opened the very first road into Southern California, which is too cool. Again, here's the S2. Sorry, I've been getting kind of distracted. I promise I'll get back down to the wagon road. But I didn't see this last time. There's actually some old stone ruins across the way, and I'm very curious as to what they are. I did not see these last time I was here. And actually this, I'm not sure if these are actually old or if this is the gate to something. Better watch out for this cactus here. Yeah, these are newer. I'm not sure what these are for or why they're here. Get out of here. All right, well, that's a toilet. Kind of looks like an old school outhouse. That is absolutely too funny. I presume one of them is a men's and one of them is a women's, though I'm not sure that that really matters when you're out here. Okay, well, that was probably the last thing I expected to find. We're two stone outhouses out here, essentially in the middle of nowhere. But I'm gonna go ahead and cross back over the S2, descend back into Box Canyon, and press on down the old wagon road. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure if this detour was worth it because I really could have seen all this from the side of the road. And now I have to descend back into the canyon, but I'm really hoping that I get a little bit more shade along the way, but I think I might be out of luck. As the sun continues to rise, we get closer to high noon, I think I'm gonna suffer for it. But that's okay, that's why we do this. It's an adventure. Okay, I am back on the wagon road, if you can call it that. I still can't believe anybody was able to get a wagon. I know, again, it's changed some over the years, but it's still the original route. And just seeing these rock faces, I don't know, I just really marvel at the feat of the Mormon Battalion and everyone who came after them that bravely pressed forth through this canyon. Now I'm at what I would imagine is one of the narrowest portions of this wagon road. And I think if we were to see any evidence of the Mormon Battalion and their axe strikes and shovel strikes carving out this rock, it might be here. And to be honest with you, I'm not really sure exactly what that might look like 170 years later. But just picturing those men in this heat, back here with hand tools, just hacking away, trying to basically create a few inches of clearance on either side to get the wagons through, is just crazy. And I gotta figure out how to even walk through this because the trees are kind of overgrown and there's that rock face that's pretty angled, but I'm gonna find a way to get across here. Wow. This is insane. Not even sure if this continues on. Looks like it does this way. A pretty sharp turn. And a boulder fell at some point, sort of blocking the path. But I'm gonna keep climbing because I'm very curious to see where this goes and how it looks. Man. There's some markings on the rocks. I don't know if that's necessarily from 170 years ago. All right, this just kind of continues up the gorge, so I'm gonna keep going, see where this takes me. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not even sure if this is still the Wagon Road. This seems impossible. I mean, it's incredibly difficult for me to even hike through. I can't even fathom trying to get a wagon through this. I just came through that gorge there. And I don't have phone service, so I can't really check all trails or anything else to see if I'm still on that trail, but I'm gonna go a little bit further. I don't know, maybe I'll see some signs of the Wagon Road, whether it's a sign or something else, and if not, I'll head back and go from there. All right, well, I've got good news and bad news. I'll start with the bad news. Well, I got two bits of bad news, now I'm stuck in a bush. Okay, the bad news is I finally got service. I guess that's good news, but I finally got service and saw that I was no longer on the trail, which means I just climbed through this rocky gorge for no reason. The good news is, for the Mormon Battalion in 1847, they didn't have to try to get a wagon up here, which the further up I climbed, I realized that was an absurd notion. While Box Canyon is incredibly difficult to traverse, there's no way it was this difficult, because this would actually be impossible to get a wagon up these rocks. So I'm gonna descend down through this rocky channel, as it were, try to get back on track, and continue down what I hope to be the rest of the Wagon Road. So here goes nothing. I mean, to be honest with you, this one's completely on me. I should have known better. It's blinded by adventure. I'm starting to feel like Chevy Chase in National Lampoon's Vacation when he's walking out through the desert, slowly losing his mind. I think I'm getting close there. It's not good. So I'm back by the bedrock funnel, and I finally see this wooden sign, which is pretty deteriorated. But I remember seeing these online. You see the kind of steerhead there, and I believe it says something about the Mormon Battalion or the Wagon Train Trail. So I assume it continues on up this way. We're gonna give this route a shot based on my maps, and we'll see where it takes us. Okay, good news. I found where the old Wagon Road picks back up. So we're gonna press on a little bit further, I think before the heat gets to me, and then turn back around, because this is a one way out, one way back. Unfortunately for me, it's not a loop, which why would it be a loop? That'd be weird. Of course, here we are coming up on the original pipe that the Mormon Battalion installed. Only joking. Not sure what that's for, I guess for runoff or something. Check that out, it goes right through the other side underneath the S2. And I'm not sure if you saw that car drive by, but we're now back up against the S2, still below it quite a bit. And there's a little bit more of this preserved portion of the Wagon Road left before it ultimately joins in with the hiking and riding trail. Okay, I've reached the end of the preserved portion of the 1847 wagon road. I believe it was about 1.4 miles out from where I parked. So definitely looking forward to the walk back. But this was neat. It was cool just seeing all of the geographic features and what they would have dealt with, both the Mormon Battalion and everyone who came after them to go through this pass in Box Canyon. Again, probably better known as Devil's Canyon or Cook's Pass, named after Army Lieutenant Colonel Cook, who led the Mormon Battalion. But I'm gonna go ahead and begin my journey back. If we see anything along the way, we'll take a look. But for the most part, that was a trip down a preserved portion of a wagon road that was carved out over 170 years ago and remains virtually untouched today. Looking at rock features such as this that are completely flattened along the side parallel to the wagon road makes me wonder if this is an actual portion that was hand-hewn by the Mormon Battalion. And there are some marks on the rocks, and again, it is very clearly done by man, that flattening there. So who knows, we might be looking at a part of the rocks here in Box Canyon that the Mormon Battalion carved out by hand in 1847, which I guess would make sense being right there. And as we continue back, you can see these high rocky cliffs on either side. And this looks like it's mostly wide enough to fit a wagon. But I'll be on the lookout for more of those noticeably man-made portions, or the parts that were clearly hacked down and flattened out. And who knows? Again, we might be seeing some old evidence out here in the desert from long ago. You know, I've seen enough Westerns to know that this is not a good place to be. You can almost picture people up there on the rocky ledge looking down. Easy prey down here. That was a really cool experience to be able to walk in the footsteps of the Mormon Battalion and all of those immigrants, adventurers, and pioneers who have used this exact wagon road for over 170 years. It's really neat. And despite the heat, I'm glad I came out here and hiked the entire thing so I could get a feel for the geography and just how difficult it would have been to try to get a wagon through these passes, through Box Canyon. But I'm heading back to the car now. It is getting pretty hot. And that's going to be it for this one. Now it's on to the next journey.